Hi, I do have a little presentation type of thing, so I can just go ahead and share my screen if it'll let me. I don't know if I have. Okay, I think that worked. Um, I'm very new to Zoom, so I can't see what I'm doing. Okay, is that working? Cool. Okay. Hi, I'm Vibha. I graduated from the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign this past May, and I got a degree in computer science. While I was in college, I was a member of engineering council, which is similar to student council, except it's only for the College of Engineering. Engineering Employment Expo, which is the student-run organization that puts on U of I's engineering career fair, which is one of the largest career fairs in the country. And I was also in the Society of Women Engineers. After graduation, I'm now currently working as a software architect at NVIDIA. There were a few questions about my job and what I do, so I can talk a little bit about that right now. As a software architect, my job is to identify problems that exist within the hardware infrastructure organization. So I'm actually on a hardware infrastructure team, which is pretty interesting because I was a computer science major, so my background is in software. But this kind of takes a look at the developing hardware processes, sees any issues in terms of um, anything that could be automated essentially in that process. So whether they're doing their testing by hand, and if there's a way to make that into a software automated process, we identify those gaps and then we take solutions from figuring out what the problem is all the way to the end. So it's kind of a cool job because I get to not only do the engineering part of it, I also kind of act as a product and project manager for whatever I'm working on. So it's kind of up to me to figure out what the best language, what the best tools, what the best frameworks are to build solutions. So it's kind of my job. And I can talk a little bit more about that if you have any questions. But the next thing that I kind of wanted to talk about was Ms. Dana thought that it would be cool to go over what classes look like in college. And so freshman year, I guess, is what you're probably most interested in. Um, and that's going to be mostly intro level classes at U of I. It was heavily Java based first semester, and it still is. And then second semester, you'll learn a little bit of C++. It's mainly focused on programming practices, good software design, and basic data structures. And that's going to be the focus of freshman year. So if you have taken any computer science classes, you'll be super prepared to go into it. If you've taken AP CS at Fremd, then or are planning to take it, then you'll basically have done the entire first like CS class at U of I, which is pretty cool. And Fremd really sets you up to succeed with just that one class. So that's pretty awesome. And then any other classes you take will definitely give you a really good background going into college. And your freshman year lectures are going to be pretty big at U of I specifically because it is a really big school. It'll be 200 to 400 kids in your class, which is a pretty big difference from Fremd. But you'll get used to it pretty quickly. And then you'll have weekly labs that are led by TAs, which are usually either graduate students or PhD students. And there's 20 students in each of those, and they also have undergrad TAs. So there's a lot of resources, a lot of help, even in such a big school. And then at smaller schools, your lectures will be a bit smaller. And then as you go into your sophomore and junior year, you'll do more in-depth classes, but they'll still be pretty structured along a curriculum. So you won't be doing like crazy electives just yet. Junior year, you'll definitely start to explore and start to take electives, but mostly you'll learn about computer architecture, systems, more lower level things and languages. And you'll also have the chance to take electives like databases, ML and AI, bioinformatics. I know there were a few questions about how computer science integrates with other disciplines. And so there's electives that really help make that connection, I'd say, across any school. And then senior year, you'll be finishing up mostly elective courses, any required classes that you may have left. And then at U of I, a lot of students will take up part-time research or part-time internships along with their curriculum. I didn't know too many people who were just doing computer science majors that had a ton left to do senior year. It was mostly them either picking up a minor or doing a job outside of class or something like that. So there were a few questions about extracurriculars and side projects in college, specifically in terms of like internships or job related things. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I think one big thing that employers, or when you're looking for an internship, will look for is what you're doing outside of your classes. And in college, you won't be spending 8 hours a day in a classroom setting. You'll be spending maybe 2 to 3 hours a day in class, especially your junior and senior year. So you'll have a lot of time outside of class to kind of fill with what you would want. And so extracurriculars and side projects are a good way of doing that. And sometimes those two can come together. So if you're in an engineer, there's a lot of different types of extracurriculars. So for example, there's engineering related organizations. That's mostly what I did in college. So there's going to be engineering councils across most schools, some sort of like student council for the engineering school. There's outreach organizations. That's when you will go to like local schools and teach elementary, middle school, high school kids about STEM. There's honor societies that you will be invited to apply to if your GPA is high. And then there's also professional engineering fraternities and sororities. So they're more social organizations, but they also have networking events. They have a really good professional component to it. They have really good alumni networks. So those are engineering related organizations. And then there's major specific organizations, and these will be kind of where your extracurriculars and your side projects might come together. So there's Women in Computer Science, Association for Computing Machinery, Hack for Impact, and those are all really cool organizations that are very specific to computer science, and they'll have tech groups inside of them. So Association for Computing Machinery, ACM, has special interest groups. And so there's one for music, there's one for AI, ML, that type of thing. So students can really do side projects within the extracurriculars they're in, along with other people in the group. And then Hack for Impact is a really cool newer group. It's also an application-based group, but once you're in, you do computer science projects, but for social good. So that's a really cool newer org that's coming up. And then a lot of engineering students, a lot of computer science students will get into non-engineering related extracurriculars, which include professional business fraternities, any startup organizations, and then consulting. So in case you are in computer science and you're like, I really want to do tech consulting, then a business fraternity or a consulting organization might be a cool way to get some exposure to that. And then side projects is something that everyone talks about when you're in college in computer science. And those are essentially projects that you work on outside of your classwork. And you can either do those solo or with friends and students. A lot of common ones are creating a web application, making a game, creating an app. And a lot of those either start as something that was in your extracurriculars and you kind of can include that as a side project, or it's something that you worked on in class and you wanted to expand it and make something bigger out of that. So you started something in class and you're like, this is really cool, I want to keep working on it. And then it becomes a side project. They're a good way to add to your resume, and it's a good way to see what you're interested in computer science. If you heard about this most recent buzzword and you're like, oh, what's deep learning? What's machine learning? A side project is a really good way to kind of explore that and see if you're actually interested in that or not. And it also shows companies what your specific interests are and what you're building expertise in versus your classes, which are a little bit more general. So I will say for side projects though, a lot of people will put things that they worked on in class as projects on their resume. I did that. It's totally fine, totally acceptable. The reason I filled most of my time with engineering related organizations was because I was doing a lot of coding, a lot of computer science work in my classes, and I didn't necessarily want to do that in my free time. And that's totally fine too. I actually only had maybe one side project the entirety of my college experience that was outside of class. The rest of the stuff that I was doing was purely in class work and then doing stuff in my extracurriculars. And companies appreciate that too. I've had a lot of questions about my work in engineering council, in Expo. So it's totally fine if you're not doing side projects all the time, because that definitely wasn't me, but if that's you, then that's great, and companies appreciate that a lot as well. So talking a little bit about internships and jobs, most colleges will have career fairs and recruiting events at the beginning of every semester. I can speak to U of I. We have two career fairs, one at the beginning of fall, one at the beginning of the spring semester. The fall one has over 400 companies that come and over 9,000 recruiters. So it's like one of the biggest fairs in the country. And there's recruiting events spread out throughout the semester. So you'll have companies coming in and out to recruit students, which is pretty nice. You'll get face-to-face interaction with the recruiters. And then there's on-campus interviews as well at U of I. So companies you'll meet a recruiter. If they like you, they'll give you an interview for like the next day. So that's pretty cool. The interviews for software jobs are mostly technical. So they'll give you a coding question that you have to solve on a whiteboard in front of them. But I wouldn't really worry about that until sophomore or junior year. Freshman year, they'll be behavioral. There's a lot of companies that hire freshmen for internships. I listed a few. State Farm is really big. John Deere hires a lot of freshmen. Some of the big companies like Microsoft and Google will have separate programs for freshmen. And those are really, really cool programs like Microsoft Explorer. I had a friend who got into Microsoft as a freshman, as one of their Explore interns, and then just kept taking return offers, and now he works there full time. So I would definitely encourage you guys to apply or look at those programs, because I didn't when I was a freshman. I was like, oh, there's no way, I don't know anything. There's no way I'm going to get an internship at Microsoft freshman year. So I just didn't even try. And having graduated now, I'm like, okay, well, these programs are specifically for freshmen and sophomores. So that's definitely something to check out. And then there are schools that have internship opportunities around campus. So at U of I, there's Research Park. And so there's Yahoo, John Deere, NVIDIA, Synchrony Financial, Motorola, all have offices there. And then near Duke, UNC, in North Carolina State, there's Research Triangle that has a ton of companies that can employ students. And then the other big tip for internships and jobs is to join organizations that have really strong alumni connections, so you can leverage referrals. And so essentially what that means is you can reach out to alum that you may or may not know and say, hi, I see that you're working at this place. I'm also in this org. I was wondering if we could have a quick phone call so I could talk to you about what you do, what your job is, the company, blah, blah. And after you set that phone call, most people will be really willing to give you a referral if you're in an organization that has strong alumni connections. So that was really, really cool, and something that I didn't know until junior or senior year of college, is how cool referrals and how important they are. So I jotted down some of the questions that were already submitted. So I guess I can go through those unless there's anything that's come up now, or I can just keep going.
Yeah, just keep going. Nothing else has been sent to me in the chat. If you guys have questions, you can always send them to me in the chat, and then I'll send them over to Vibha.
So the first question I got was, how did you know you wanted to study CS in college? For me, it was kind of a weird path. I actually didn't think I was going to study computer science at all until I took APCS with Mrs. Denna senior year. So that's a completely different path than most of you, I'm assuming, because I just didn't even know. But once I did take that class, I knew I wanted to study CS because I really enjoyed it. Felt like doing logic puzzles from when I was a kid, and those were my favorite things to do. And it kind of felt like the adult version of that. So one, I really enjoyed the problem solving and going through the process of it. And the other thing was because I saw how it could be applied to so many different things. And now at this point, technology and like computer science can help improve almost every field. And the other thing now that I know is also about how there's a lot of like ethical and moral conundrums that come with computer science. And it was cool to kind of get to learn more about that. But I didn't know about that before going in there. But I think for me, it was like I enjoyed the backbone of it, which was the logic, which was like the problem solving methods. So that's why I wanted to study it in college. What do I work on at NVIDIA? So like I said, I'm on a hardware infrastructure team. So essentially I help build software that the hardware teams use to build chips. So I'm definitely on the chips end of the business because there's three sectors of it. There's the gaming chips, there's the AI simulation part of it, and then there's the data center part of the business. So NVIDIA has 3 parts. I'm on the chips side of it, but I mainly work on software tools. What programming languages do I work with? At my job, it's pretty flexible, like I said, because I'm the one kind of deciding um, what kind of languages and frameworks and tools that I want to use. Right now, I'm using a language called Dart, which I had no idea, had never heard of, knew nothing about it until 3 weeks ago when I started working on it. But the cool thing is, after being at U of I for 4 years, you pick up languages pretty quickly. They all kind of look and act the same. So right now I'm doing Dart, JavaScript, and learning Go. So that's currently what I'm using. How is my job? Was it worth the hard work? I really like my job. I think the cool part of it for me is I generally am a little bit more of a social person. And so my job is cool because I not only get to do the coding side of it, which can be a little bit solitary, but I'm also the manager of the tool that I'm building. So I have to go talk to all of the hardware teams that are going to be using my product and make sure that the thing that I'm building for them is what they want and will be useful to them. And so that has me in a lot of meetings, has me talking to a lot of people. And so I think for me, my job is a good balance of like the management side of software and also like the coding side. But obviously there's jobs that are all one and all the other. So it just depends on the track that you want to do. Was it worth the hard work? Yes, I loved college. I thought it was so much fun. The hard work is part of the fun. I think some of my favorite memories of college are just sitting around the library table with all of my friends trying to get through our next assignment. So I definitely think it's worth the hard work in the end. And it's, I think the best feeling is when you've been working on something that just doesn't work for like a week and then you finally get it working. And I think that's what makes it worth it. What do you think was the most impactful high school extracurricular for college and career? So like I said, in high school, I didn't really know that I was going to go into computer science or engineering. So I didn't do anything super STEM related in high school that prepared me for college admissions specifically. But for my career, surprisingly, I think it would be the Viking log, because when I was there, that was the only club where I felt like I was really in a leadership role where I was making impact, and actually like changing the direction of where the paper went and making decisions. And I think that really showed me that I wanted to be in some sort of management or leadership role at some point in my career, rather than working solely on a technical path. So I think for my career path, it was really impactful because it showed me that I wanted to become like an engineering team lead or an engineering team manager in the future versus working up a technical ladder, which also exists. Another question was, how is CS applied in other fields? So the thing about computer science is that it is applicable everywhere. So the question specifically was asked about psychiatry or psychology, and CS can be applied there in so many ways. There's cognitive science, which computer science has a huge impact in artificial intelligence, biological perception, and then in terms of computer science and biology, there's so many informatics courses because genome sequencing is entirely now computer science based, analyzing cell populations and protein samples. That's all now based in data and computers. So that's another place where computer science interacts with another discipline. Agriculture, linguistics, music, those are all fields that are super applicable to computer science. John Deere actually does a really cool job of integrating machine learning with their products. And they do like soil analysis and field analysis using drones, natural language processing with Siri, Alexa, Google Homes. Those are all linguistics applications of computer science. And then in music, there's song analysis tools. And then now they're looking into AI software that can compose novel music. So CS is applied in many ways in other fields. And then also in general, as computers get more and more powerful, they can process more data. And so that directly influences research and development in almost every area. Another question was—
pause you for just a minute because
Yeah.
I've got a couple questions that came to me in the chat. So I've been sending them to you, but essentially the gist of several of them have asked, how much free time did you have outside of class in comparison to like course related work?
Mhm.
Several people have asked if you get free chips for working at NVIDIA and if you have any graphics chips that they can see. Let's see, another person said they've heard that CS in college feels more like proof-based math classes like linear algebra as opposed to like coding and like APCS. And then the last question, why don't you answer those first and then I can forward you
Okay.
more.
Okay. So the first one I think was about free time. So freshman and sophomore year, I was definitely more busy because, like I said, your schedule is a lot more structured. And you have all these like math classes that you need to take, and all these CS classes you have to take, and all your gen eds that you have to take. So it's definitely a lot more structured. You'll be in class a lot more. And so I think freshman year, I was in class from like 9 to 5, 3 days a week, and then like not really that much class the rest of the week. It's definitely a little bit more class heavy freshman and sophomore year, but by junior and senior year, I was in class maybe 8 hours a week. And so the rest of my time was free time. And I was either doing like internship stuff because I had a part-time job, or I was doing homework or extracurricular side project stuff. And so you definitely have a lot more time in college to do things than in high school, because you kind of structure your own day, and even your schedule. You at U of I, you make it completely on your own. Even freshman year, like you'll sit down with an advisor, they'll tell you what to take, but you schedule it all on your own. Um, so I would definitely say freshman, sophomore year, you'll be in class for like 15 plus hours, and then that number only goes down junior and senior year if you only do computer science as your major and don't add anything on top of that. Yeah. What was the next one?
Are the classes in college more proof-based, like linear algebra? Like, are your coding classes more proof-based, or are they still like coding classes like APCS?
So it definitely depends on the class. There's definitely more coding classes than there are theoretical classes. You definitely have to take linear algebra. There is an algorithms and models of computation class at U of I, which is brutal, but it's just that one class. Um, and there's a discrete structures class, which is theoretical, but the rest of the core classes are all um, pretty coding heavy, I would say. And then if you're interested in that side of computer science, there's a ton of electives you can take that are more theoretical. So you can work up the math um, side of the course load. You can go into more algorithms and models of computation. There's electives on that end. So I think it depends on what you like, but I would say the core of the CS curriculum is a little bit more coding based than it is theoretical, but you can always supplement that. If you're like, I want more theoretical stuff, you can always supplement that with research that professors are doing on the side.
And then some other students were wondering, in terms of like the advantages, disadvantages of attending a large school like UIUC. And then another student asked about the differences between UIUC and UIC.
Okay. So a large school, I think the advantages of that is that there's more professors, they're doing more research, there's more variety, I would say. In terms of that, there's a lot more like classes that they can offer because there's generally more students. But it is less personalized. So because it's a big school, your lectures will be bigger. There's less, oh, something happened. There's less personalized interaction with the professors, so they won't really know you as well. And I would say it's mostly just the bigger lectures. If you have trouble maybe making, I don't even think that's true, because you can always make a big school smaller, is what everyone says, and I didn't really understand it going into school, but now I can kind of tell, because once you join your organizations, that becomes kind of your little social circle. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think in terms of the actual school environment, smaller schools definitely will have more personalized instruction than bigger schools will, but bigger schools might have more classes and like more clubs to get involved with, more research opportunities, and they might be closer to bigger bigger offices and bigger companies to work at part-time, and they also might have bigger career fairs than the smaller school might. But it also just depends on the school. because U of I is a really big school, but there's obviously like medium level schools that kind of have like the best of both worlds maybe. I just think it just depends, but I think either way, you can't really go wrong with a computer science degree. So
And then in terms of the differences between UIC and UIUC, I know there's a big cost difference and location in terms of Chicago versus down in Champaign. I have some students who are looking at UIC just for proximity and finances. What can you say about their program versus UIUC?
I actually don't know too much about UIC's program, but for computer science in general, like I said, the APCS class at Fremd does just as good of a job as the intro level class at U of I. So I will say for computer science specifically, Java is the same regardless of where you go. Data structures will be the same regardless of where you go. Um, so I think in terms of classes and things like that, like the content of the core level classes will be the same. And so that's what I believe about computer science across the board is no matter what school you go to, you'll still get the same information because STEM doesn't change based on where you go or what program you're in. So I don't know too much about UIC's program specifically though.
Okay, a few other questions that came in. Let's see. Somebody asked about how much math is required to do computer science in college. And then another student asked how you chose CS engineering versus one of the CS plus X majors. I don't even know if those were offered when you started as a freshman, were they?
Yeah, they were.
Okay.
I think that was like the second year that they had started. But what was the first question? I'm like spacing.
That's okay. The first question was how much math is required for
Oh, okay, right.
degree.
So at Fremd, I went up till Calc BC and then I didn't do multi. So at U of I, all I had to do was Calc 3, which is the equivalent of multi, and then linear algebra, and then a statistics class. So there's not that much math at all. You just have to get through the calc sequence, do linear algebra, and then a statistics class. And that kind of covers all of math for computer science. And then there are classes that will go into a little bit more math. So there's a discrete structures class that talks about number theory a little bit. That's not super traditional math. And then all of the ML classes will go into linear algebra, and so will the VR class. So it just depends. But the traditional math only goes up till linear algebra, and then one probability class. So not a ton. And then the other question.
Let's see. Oh, so I'm trying to like keep up with these questions here. Sorry, guys, I'm doing my best. So if I miss your question, just send it to me again. Let's see. There was a question about how you chose CS engineering versus CS plus X. And then there was also a student wanting to know about the physics requirement for computer science. And then how important is your GPA in college?
Okay. So CS engineering versus CS plus, I wanted to do CS engineering because I didn't really have a super invested interest in any of the pluses. So from what I've seen with my friends at U of I who have done CS plus something, they spend a lot of time doing their plus X and they don't get priority status for elective registration junior and senior year for CS Tech electives. And instead they get priority registration for their plus X electives. And so I didn't really know if I was interested in any of the plus X's enough to be dedicating like 30 to 40% of my course load doing that. And so that's why I did CS engineering. The only reason I almost didn't was because of the physics requirement, but it is essentially you need to do calculus-based physics for both mechanics and E&M. And so if you do, I didn't. I took both of those at U of I. I actually took the second one, which is E&M, calculus-based E&M at Harper over the summer because I didn't want to do it at U of I. But those are the only two classes you need to take. So you'll be done with that by the end of freshman year if you take CS engineering and you're like, I really don't like physics. It's just two classes. And I think Fremd, just Fremd physics in general does a really good job of preparing you going into that. So it's not too bad. And then there was a question about GPA.
Mm.
Okay. So in college, your GPA doesn't matter a ton if you're going straight into the workplace, but it matters if you want to go to grad school at some point. So obviously try to keep your GPA as high as you can, but it definitely matters a little bit less than it did in high school. I think in high school, there's a lot of pressure to keep your GPA up, but a lot of employers in college don't really look at it as much. I know a lot of students don't even put their GPA on their resume, and they still end up doing okay. So there's a lot less grade pressure to get a certain job, to get a certain internship that just isn't there. But if you're applying to grad school, you still have to do another college application process, and that's where your GPA matters a little bit. But it's definitely not like in high school.
There was a question about how to decide which internships to apply for, and if you are given multiple offers, how do you distinguish which one's the best fit for you?
So in terms of how to pick between offers, I would say it depends on where you're at in your internship, like what year you're in. So I would say like freshman, sophomore year, junior year, I guess any internship opportunity, I would do something that you haven't done before. So like I said, one of my friends, he did Microsoft all the way through, took his return offer, and like that's something that worked for him. But I really wanted to explore, see what working at different size companies would be at, working at different industries would be like. So the first internship I did was at a startup with like 10 people. And then the next internship I did was and that was in healthcare. And then the second internship I did was at a mid-sized company in the fintech industry. And so that was a completely different type of work, completely different type of work environment. And then the next internship I did was at NVIDIA, which is a much larger company and in a completely different industry. And I think having a variety of experiences really helped me figure out what kind of environment I liked working in, how different industries affect the work you're doing. And so if you're deciding between offers and you have one offer or a few offers that are different from the other internships you've done, I would highly encourage going with something you haven't done before just to see what you like and what you don't like. And I think that really helps moving forward.
And several people have asked if you have any graphic cards or chips you can show.
I do not. I don't get those for free because I know a lot of hardware people that work directly on hardware teams, they get them with their job, a graphics card. But I don't. I work on a purely software team, so I do not have one. And we get a discount, but they're not free.
All right, I think that was it for my questions in the chat. So if you sent me something in the chat that I have not yet asked, send it again. Otherwise, I'm going to have Vibha take a look at some of the other internships on the screen that she didn't get to yet.
I can just keep.
Yeah, I
going.
really like that collaboration question and like future CS students. I think that's a good one. What's it like being an adult? Those are all great questions.
Collaboration, I think this is like the one thing that I would encourage people to ask if you know any current students at prospective schools, is to ask them what collaboration was like at their school. Because I can speak for U of I, where everyone was super, super helpful. And I think that made my college experience exponentially better. I remember there would be times when we'd be in the library with just me and my like group of friends, and we'd be working on something, and then we would hear another group talking about a similar assignment or the same assignment, just like hear words that were like, oh, we're working on the same thing. And my friend would go and just be like, hey, are you guys working on this? And they'd be like, yeah. And we'd all just work together, and everyone was really willing to collaborate and like work together and help each other out. And I think one big reason for that is because U of I does not grade on a curve. And so essentially what that means is there's no preset 20% of students can get an A. It's always a letter, it's always a grade. So they'll be like, okay, like 90, if you get a 90, you'll get an A. And if it is graded on a curve, it's graded on a curve to help you, because the class is hard enough where not enough students will get a 90. So they can't have set grades. And that's the only only scenario in which case they grow on a curve is to help the students. And so when you're in a scenario like that, there's no harm in helping someone else learn a concept or studying together for a test, because everyone that studies together can get an A. And so that was one thing that was really important in my college experience. Was it never felt cutthroat. It was always very collaborative. And I think that was really, really important to both my college experience as well as just generally my learning, because people were willing to help me. I always ended up learning something versus being confused and doing poorly. And then collaboration in the workplace is definitely different. It's definitely something I'm getting used to. In college, all of your classmates are working on the same assignment and you're all working on it at the same time with the same due dates. In the workplace, that is not the case. I'm working on my own project, and it's not been done before. And so I work with one coworker and he's working something completely separate from me. So collaboration is definitely different because everyone's working on different things. And it's a lot more independent than I guess I was used to in college. And so that's something that's new. And did I feel fully prepared by college for my job? I would say yes. There's a lot of classes at U of I where you're just kind of thrown into the deep end, and that's kind of what your job is. And then in college, there's TAs and professors to help you out. And so it kind of helps you in terms of, okay, you're kind of floating around not knowing what to do, and there's people to help you in college. And so you kind of get used to that feeling and build up strategies to learn, and you really understand how to utilize the internet and your resources to learn on your own a little bit. And that's kind of what your job is like. So I really did feel prepared by college and all the classes that we had to take for my job. And then any advice for CS students, like I said, apply. If you're interested in applying to the big companies, I would do it right off the bat, freshman year. I didn't, like I said, because I didn't think I could get it. And that in hindsight was a silly move. I should have just done it. And then also take the classes that people will say are hard but cool. Because there was this one class, it's called computer security at U of I. And it is by far the hardest class I have ever taken in college, but it was also the coolest class. And I don't think I would have taken that if I had been scared of taking a harder class. And a lot of the times I was like, okay, what's the best elective I could take? And a lot of people suggested this one, and I'm really glad I took it. And so my advice is, one, ask for help. Just go up to random people, and if they're working on the same thing as you, just ask them. And if they say yes, they say yes, and you've made a new study friend. Apply for any job that you think you're qualified for, especially those freshman, sophomore internships at Microsoft, Google, etc. And then, yeah, and then don't be afraid to take hard classes that you think are interesting, because like you'll learn something. And I think employers value more the knowledge that you have learned than the grade that you get. So even if you take a really hard class and you don't do as well as you would have liked, you've still learned something out of it, something that you can show in interviews, something that you can talk about in your interviews. And that in the end is what matters when you're looking for an internship. So yeah, that's my best advice, I guess.
All right, we have maybe time for one more question. I know Vibha's got to go, and I have to go as well because I start tutoring at 1:15. So do we have any last questions we want to ask?
Do you get free stuff?
Kind of. During my internship last year, I got a ton of free stuff. I got 2 backpacks. I have 2 NVIDIA backpacks now, 2 NVIDIA water bottles, a bunch of, like, I got a tote bag, a little tile thing for my keys so my keys don't get lost. Because you get $25 every business quarter to spend at their store. So you can save that up if you want to buy a chip or like a graphics card. You can save that out. It might take you a few years, but you can get that for free. But yeah, it's kind of cool. We get some free stuff. Definitely, I would say the perks of NVIDIA are not as much as the traditional tech like it's more of a traditional tech company than the ones that give away like free meals. We don't have that, but it's pretty cool. I like it.
You get any electronic free stuff?
No,
Okay,
just swag.
cool.
have you gotten like any favors from anyone? Like someone like, oh hey, can you please buy this for me real quick? Like, have you gotten?
Not really. No, I have not. The one cool thing, I guess, if I'm talking about NVIDIA, the one cool thing that I really appreciate about working there is that it's a really flat structure. So what that means is like the perks that I have gotten is that I've gone to dinner at the CEO's house because he invites all of the interns and all of the new hires to get for dinner at his house. And it's so basically if you like want to meet someone really important, all you have to do is message them and they will reply to you, which is kind of cool. And not really something that you see at really big tech companies. Like you can't just message the CEO of Google and be like, hi, I'm coming for dinner. But at NVIDIA, everyone's really approachable because like the VPs are like 3 people above you and they come to all your meetings and you get to see them and they get to know you. So that's something that's also pretty cool about the perks, I guess, of working at NVIDIA.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciated having you and all the wonderful knowledge that you shared. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.